Hey guys, welcome to Fit Tip Tuesday. Today I'm going to answer a subscriber's question about doing a cuffed hem on a tapered leg. If you are following along with me and you're looking for how to do a cuffed leg on like dress pants, I'm going to put a link to that tutorial in the description below because I already did that. But I just want to show how to create the shaped cuff you need when the hem is more narrow than the top of the cuff, like where the top of the cuff is going to sit. So you can see here in front of me, I have a shorts pattern that has a taper in the leg. And actually, if you're making shorter shorts, even if your leg is a straight leg, it tapers because from the tip of the crotch points, front and back, it comes in towards the knee. So the first thing I want to do is decide what I want my finished length to be on my shorts with a cuff. Now, the one thing you have to consider here is whatever you mark for your finished length, just know the cuff is going to come up, fold back up on top of the shorts, on the right side of the shorts. So you can't have the length of your shorts too close to your crotch point because the cuff will be in that area. So I would say if you're making cuffed shorts, I would give yourself at least, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches of an inseam for a finished length, because then you'll have room for a cuff. So I'm going to go with 4 inches here. So I'm just going to make a guideline 4 inches below my crotch point. Now you're going to do the exact same thing to the back. I'm showing this on the front leg, but you're going to do the same thing on the back as well. And you want to make sure that your inseam is the same length front and back, obviously, because you have to sew it together. So measure on your inseam the length that you want your shorts to be. Then what you're going to do is you're going to draw yourself a horizontal line that will be your new hem, and this line is perpendicular to your grain line. So you can see my grain line, my finished length of my shorts. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to decide how wide of a cuff you want. So for these shorts, I think I'll do 1 inch. Maybe let's do 1.25 inches. So I've got my 1.25 inches here, and I'm just going to make dashes at the center, side seam, and inseam. So that's going to indicate the top of my cuff. So in addition to the cuff, we need to add another 1.25 inches to turn into the inside. So basically you're going to need double the width of your cuff plus a little wiggle room. So let's add an extra 1/4 inch. So basically I'm going to measure down another 1.5 inches, because remember my cuff is 1.25 inches. So I'm going to measure down 1.5 inches here, and I'm going to draw that line straight across like this. Okay, so this is where we cut the leg off. So you can see here, I'm just going to cut this off here because we don't need the rest of the pattern. All right, so now how do we get the cuff to lay nicely on the leg when it's more narrow down here than it is up here? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to fold the pants pattern or the shorts pattern on the finished length line. Okay, so you can see this is the finished length of our shorts. Then I'm going to fold it up along the guide that I drew for my cuff, like this. Okay, and you can see what's happening here is I've got this big jog. So you can see the cuff edge finishes right here, but our inseam is over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut that out like this along the original inseam. And I'm going to cut this one out on the side. So let's just cut it out. And then I'll just cut this out too. Okay, so basically you're cutting along your original inseam. Now watch what happens when I open this up. Look at this craziness I have going on here. That's the shape that your inseam needs to have to create that cuff. So after you cut out your fabric, you're going to fold it up like this, and then you're going to fold it up like this, and that's going to give you the cuff shape that you need. So you're going to repeat this for the back leg as well. All right, so just to finish or put a review here, this is the finished length. Oops. This is the top of cuff, and this is the rest of the hem allowance, or what would we call this? So this would be the rest of your hem allowance in here. So if we turn it this way, that's what's on the inside of your leg. So we'll call this the hem allowance. Whoops. I forgot to mention that you actually have to sew up the hem before you turn the cuff up. So let me just back up here for a second. You're going to cut out your front and back legs. Okay, make sure that your inseam and your cuff width is the same front and back, because this little jog needs to match exactly front and back on your inseam. You're going to put your legs together and you're going to sew your inseam. So you're going to sew this joggy inseam. And if it's hard to keep track of your pivot points, you can actually, you know, on your fabric, if you want to chalk in where you have to pivot like this, like right on the folds, you can do that. So see, I'm creating the pivot. So whatever your seam allowance is, you want to pivot right on those folded edges. Okay, so you sew those together first, and you sew your side seam. After it's sewn together, you're going to flip up the entire hem allowance to the inside. Now here's what you have to remember when you're sewing the hem up before you fold the cuff. I'm going to mark the top of my hem allowance here. I'm going to dash it in. Okay, so this is where the fabric is, the fabric edge is. Remember, we made it a little bit longer than the hem allowance. Okay, and that's just to give it some stability. So when I fold up my hem, you can see the top edge of the fabric is sticking up that little bit, that little 1/4 inch. So when you sew your hem allowance up, you want to make sure that you're sewing it a little bit lower than the hem allowance. So I'm going to just draw my little stitching line right here. So this blue line will be my stitching line. So when you fold up the cuff, the stitching line will be hidden by the folded up cuff. So just take that into consideration. When you're finishing the bottom edge of your allowance, if you trim a little bit off as you're serging it, you know, using your serger, you know, you should have about a 1/4 inch sticking up, just so it supports the stitching line. Okay, so but remember, the stitching line needs to be hidden by the cuff. So check that before you sew your hem allowance up, and then, you know, fold the cuff up and just make sure that your stitching line is going to be hidden by the cuff. Okay, so that's an important step for stitching it. So after you stitch up the hem allowance, then I would finish the edge of this on the serger here. You know, it's all sewn together, because then when you fold it up, you'll be good to go. Now, to keep the cuff up, what you can do is, along your inseam and your side seam stitching line, just stitch through all the layers in the seam, and that will hide the fact that you're tacking the cuff up, so it won't keep flipping down. So that's how you create the cuff and keep it up in your finished shorts. All right, so that's how you create a cuff on a tapered leg. If you have any questions or comments about this, please post them below and I will help you. I want to remind everybody that on Friday, we are going to be drafting the front bodice from scratch. And we're also going to be taking measurements for the back bodice. So if you missed it, last Friday during FabFit Friday, I kicked off my basic bodice draft along. So I will have links to the front and back measurement charts that you need to create or draft your own basic bodice. And then join me this Friday for part 2, where I show you how to draft the front bodice using your measurements. And I'm going to show you how to take back measurements on yourself, so you'll be ready for next week when we draft the back bodice. So that's what's coming up this week on FabFit Friday. If you're enjoying my Fit Tip Tuesdays and FabFit Fridays, please consider subscribing to my channel, because then you'll get notified every time I upload something new. And I just want to thank everybody for sewing and fitting along with me, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.